Thank you, and good morning. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm grateful for that warm introduction. I would be remiss if I did acknowledge my Congressman Bobby Rush from the 1st Congressional District, and State Representative Melissa Conyers-Ervin, who's a candidate for Treasurer of the City of Chicago. As you heard from Reverend, I began my working life as a teacher. I spent 10 years in the classroom, and I loved it. You know, young people have tremendous energy and enthusiasm and hope, and it's a great privilege to be able to be a teacher. I loved it. Let me just say, though, that early on in my teaching career, I lost a student to gun violence. She was murdered in a drive-by. And it was on her own front porch. She just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is true of so many of the young people that we've lost. It was devastating for her family, for her fellow students, for the faculty and staff at our school. There was an empty seat in my classroom for the rest of the year. And it led me to have a lifelong commitment to sensible gun laws and to trying to address the challenges that violence brings to so many of our neighborhoods, And let me say, we often talk about the need for more police, better training, better supervision of our police, but we're not going to solve the violence challenges that plague so many of our neighborhoods simply with policing. Although we need better policing and we need to have a better collaboration and cooperation between our communities and police, we're going to have to invest in our neighborhoods. You know, we used to say when I was alderman that nothing stops a bullet like a job. We have to invest in our neighborhoods because we know that the neighborhood businesses hire people in the neighborhoods. And if we can rebuild our communities, if we can invest in our communities and invest in the businesses in our communities, we can provide employment in our own neighborhoods and help address some of the violence challenges that we face. I think it's important that people who are working folks get paid enough to support themselves and their families. So there are several parts to this. One, we need to build up our communities. We need to invest in affordable housing. We need to invest in our small businesses. And I have a plan to increase our investments in small businesses through loan and grant programs to help them get started, to help them build their businesses, to help them maintain their businesses. But we also have to support the working people, and I support a $15 an hour minimum wage in the city of Chicago. I've been a strong supporter of what they call the fight for 15. And let me just say, 15 is not an arbitrary number. It's what it takes for a family of 4 to be just above the poverty level. You know, so there are people who say, hey, that's too much. You know, we can't afford that. Anybody who works for a living shouldn't be in poverty. Anybody who works for a living shouldn't be in poverty. So we have to support our small businesses in our neighborhoods, of course, but we also have to support our workers wherever they are. And that means at least $15 an hour. You know, when I was alderman, people would come into my office and say, I'm thinking about moving into the 4th ward, this ward. And they would always have 2 questions. They would always have 2 questions. Are the streets safe and are the schools good? And when I talk about the future of Chicago, I always talk about the importance of having great neighborhood schools. And we've got some in some of our neighborhoods, but you can pretty much predict the quality of schools by the zip code that the young person lives in. Our more privileged parts of the city have high-performing schools, and other parts of our city have under-resourced schools. And we've got to have well-resourced schools for every neighborhood. And I'm talking about public schools. Public schools, because the public schools take all of our kids. We've invested a lot in magnet schools and selective enrollment in charter schools, but they don't have to take every kid in the neighborhood. And we need good schools that take every child in the community. And those schools need to be well-resourced. I'm a teacher. I know how important good teachers are. But in many of our schools, we need bilingual support for our kids. We need social workers. We need psychologists. We need wraparound services to be sure that the kids are supported and nurtured and can do well in school. That's critical, good schools. I've talked about investing in our communities. When I was alderman, we built hundreds of units of housing, affordable rental housing mostly, but some mixed income, some market rate. We want working people to be able to afford to live in our city. And that means we've got to make much more investment in affordable housing in our city. Much more. We're short tens of thousands of affordable housing units in the city of Chicago. And we want to be sure that over the long term, working families can afford to live here. I spoke earlier about the need to address the public safety challenges that our communities face. We need a police force that's well-trained, well-supervised, and is held accountable for performance. You know, across the country, out of every 100 murders, a suspect is arrested in 62 or 63 of the cases. But in the city of Chicago, it's 15 out of every 100. A suspect is arrested. And we've got to hold our police force accountable for performance, especially solving the most serious crimes, the murders and the shootings. I was at a meeting yesterday on the southwest side with a young woman who lost her sister to a murder. And she and her family, of course, were devastated. And she was concerned about whether or not the police department was going to focus on solving that murder. We've got to be sure that people feel safe in their homes and safe in their communities. And we've got to put resources into solving our most serious crimes. These are challenges that I addressed when I was alderman of the 4th Ward, and they're still the challenges that our city faces. I look forward to working with you to bring our city high-performing schools in all of our neighborhoods, to rebuild the communities that have been struggling, to help small businesses that provide so much of the employment in our neighborhoods, and to work with the communities and the police to address our public safety challenges. I was the first woman elected 4th Ward alderman. I was the first woman elected to president of the County Board of Commissioners. And I look forward to being the first African-American woman elected mayor of the city of Chicago. Thank you.